Okay, thanks, everybody. I'm gonna call the February 6th East Lansing City Charter Review Committee to order. We have with us, no, as you saw in the email, that Grace Bogdansky is going to replace Asia. Thank you, Asia, for all your work with this. And Anne is here for Tony and Gibbert. She's been here before, and she tells me she'll be here for the next couple of meetings, most likely. Yeah. So I'll have that. And then Mark is going to pop in and out for in case he's doing double duty tonight. So we could have the roll call then, please.
Diane Gutierrez.
Present.
Jeffrey Hank.
Present.
Jonathan Foreman.
Present.
Dr. Ruben Martinez.
Here.
Jill Rode. Pam Will.
Here.
Dr. Veronica Wilkerson Johnson.
Present.
Dale Ruthoff.
Yeah.
Runoff. Okay. Lynn Richardson.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. Jill is on a one-time a year vacation in New York. She's very happy to be there. She told me before she left, and I'm sure she's there now. Then we need I'll move approval of the agenda as presented. Is there a second? Second. Moved by Gutierrez, seconded by Wilkerson Johnson. Any changes to the agenda? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Then we have approval of the minutes from the January 23rd meeting. I'll move approval of those. Is there a second? It's been moved by Gutierrez and seconded by Martinez. Any changes or corrections? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Written communication, 2.1. You have your packet there. Pretty much included everything that we have listed there. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to go back to the minutes. There is a change in the minutes, so I have to do this. I have to make a motion. I'm on the affirmative side. I move that we consider the minutes. There a second. Moved by Gutierrez and seconded by Inc. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. If you look on page, it's page 70, it's page 7 or 75, or it's the last page of the minutes. There, it says, the first line says, this item will return to the Charter Review meeting, next meeting, which refers to section 4.9 on the previous page. But then the next two lines, we 4.7, we already approved that and at our last meeting, and actually at 1.9, and so this item was not going to be on our next meeting. So just those two lines would be out, need to be deleted. So with that deletion of those two, because we're no longer talking about that item, I'll move approval of the amendments. By Gutierrez, seconded by Martinez. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. And I'll just say, Asia, a credit to you to all those numbers and get those all. And I spent a lot of time making sure we have this list and give this to all of us that we have of what we've approved so far has been very helpful too. So thank you. So sorry. So written communications, you do have that in your packet. Any discussion on that at all? Okay, communications from the audience. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to come forward? Okay, we'll move on to 2.3, any communications on anything from the committee. Good.
I have only one thing. One is that we talked a lot about having in relation to our transparency discussions about having things available at the library. The library is going through some reorganization and rebranding, as I understand it, and we have not talked with anyone about how those documents might be available at the library or how they might be researched or anything like that. I'm wondering if it might be helpful to this committee as we move forward before we do anything more along those lines about inviting the new library director in to see how we might incorporate language to the extent it's necessary in our recommendations on the city charter agenda about what we're asking the library to do as far as document retention, things that are available to the public and how to go about doing that.
So, it's my understanding that the library director is going to be at our April 3rd meeting. When we discuss that, do you want to have him come, ask him to come a second time or to come at that meeting when we're discussing the library?
I don't think it's my decision necessarily. I think that it's worth though raising, seeing if anybody else thinks that it's necessary before that. I wanted to flag it as an issue as we go forward because I got thinking about it after our last meeting and I thought, wait a minute, where are these things going to be kept? Are they going to be electronic? Or are they going to be, actual physical copies of things? And who might be available? My understanding is we don't have research librarians in the library. So I'm concerned about that. And if we're relying on those things, then I don't want somebody to come back and say, you can't rely on it. I don't want this meeting to be stuck. So that's just.
But let me point out that the reason that the libraries got included was because they were referenced in they're referenced as a location for documents currently in the charter. So it says in a document, I can't remember what it is, that is available in the library. And even though, yes, looking forward to having the director come, but the reality is that everything we're talking about being available is on the city website.
Well, then,
and so that's how we were talking about things being available in the office and in the city hall. They'd just be able to pull up a laptop or have a laptop available to show people the city website, and that actually would get them directly into the other online service. Jeff?
I think that's a good idea, and I was supposed to have some text for everyone tonight in the transparency section. I don't, and one of the reasons for that is I want to. That's another one, but I wouldn't mind talking to the clerk, coordinator first. I'm still waiting for Gregor's comments to a draft. I'd like to be a little thorough on it, and I think I brought that up recently that we have all these references to the city library. I'll be following it right now, but I think that's a good idea that we should do. Section 8. I will circulate some more for everyone. I didn't want to ignore that. So
that's why I sent my email, because I think it would be important to separate the FOIA requested information with the information that's currently available on the website. So we have a lot of information that is available on the website that you don't have to FOIA. That is, I think, what most citizens are looking for in terms of information. And that's a separate issue then to me between what's not available there and what you need to FOIA.
my only question coming there though, Pam, is I understand what you're saying, but if we're saying this stuff, if all we're relying on the city library to be had as an access is a computer that can be available to everybody else, then I think we need to change maybe wordsmith some of these things, because it seems to me that when we're talking about things being accessible at a certain point at the library, to me that means something more than just being able to go use a city library or a city computer or a library computer to look things up. So I'm not sure we're being real clear, and that's where my confusion, or I think there's potential for confusion.
For the deal.
Oh, I think there was also discussion in a previous discussions about like kind of future proofing this, because like in case of like as technology continues to advance, there could be other methods that becomes available besides just like a computer or something. So I think we intentionally kept it vague, if I recall correctly. So just want to bring that up.
So I wonder if Mr. Bonin could ask the new library director if he could address those concerns, like where currently are the materials that are supposed to be there. He may not know, but I know there's some staff there that might know where to look, or if it is just on a computer. And then if he would like to come, April 3rd is his meeting when we discuss the library. If he would like to come, we could put him on the agenda first thing. See if he'd just like to hear our concerns and go forward with that.
Are we aware of other documents?
Just a minute. I think that the other thing is, we have two documents here tonight. We approved one at the last meeting that I was purposeful in saying the City of East Lansing Library, because that was the protection for the future in case at some point in time we were ever merged into the other library system. And then tonight we just have City Library in our draft. And the question to me is, maybe the best way to do that is to, when we go to City Library portion of the charter, we say anything that we refers to the City Library and this charter is referring to the East Lansing Public Library, and then we can just use City Library tonight. I know we've already done one that way, but tonight we have a City Library. That might be our catch-all, so in case we don't catch something else.
So you request that too, also to get it password right,
Yes.
so we can meet all we need, whatever the person thinks at a time.
That's great. That satisfy everybody to take that next step? Okay.
What, are we familiar with, as far as I know, only the document that is identified in this charter as being available in the library is currently available in the library. Like, other than that, do we know of other city documents that are available at the library? That's a question for the director.
I think that's, and it's a new director, so I don't know, when new directors come in, I don't know what they take away, what they do in.
Yeah.
So.
No, he's still on that question.
Yes, comes.
All right, good, good catch. All right, anything else? All right, we'll move on to 3.1 new business. We have with us tonight our presentation on the city income tax. And I'm sorry, Andrea Smith.
Hello. Do I need to turn this on?
Interim Finance Director, and Andrea Smith, in my life is somebody totally different, gives anesthesia, so.
You may find this presented.
So I'm gonna move over here.
Okay.
Oh, she's not.
Oh, I can't, yeah.
Okay.
So you can stay right where you're.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Andrea Smith, the interim finance director. It was nice to see you all. I've been asked to come here and do a short presentation on the city income tax. So I know most of you are probably pretty familiar with it. I was a little disappointed Jill Rhodey wasn't going to be here because she knew she used to be our income tax administrator. So I was hoping she could help me with some of those quick questions. But she did also tell me she was going to be in New York having a wonderful time. So so everyone, I apologize that the presentation can't be up on the screen, but I do have a hard copy for all of you. Does everyone have one? Good. So I'm just going to go over kind of some facts about the income tax. And then if you have any questions for me, just go ahead and let me know. So the history of the income tax was it was voter approved, and Mark Meadows graciously told me that it was not in fall, it was in August of 2018. So it was a voter approved. It took effect in January of 2019. With that, there were some stipulations for the income tax. One being that our city operating millage was reduced by 5 mills. So at that time, with our Headley rollbacks, it was at 17.5362. And we have reduced to 12.5362, which has been pretty steady since the income tax has been placed in. We haven't had to do any rollbacks. East Lansing residents pay 1%, non-residents pay 5%, or I'm sorry, not 5%, 0.05%. And then the other part of it is that it's dedicated purposes. So what we have is 20% of that income tax funds go to our public safety, 20% goes to infrastructure, and 60% goes to our unfunded pension liabilities. Additionally, the income tax was only approved for 12 years. So it will be ending on July 31st of 2030. We will have to continue working on it after that because all of those returns will be coming in 2031 and potentially 2032 to get everything buttoned up at that time if it is not reapproved. So on to the next page. This is just a breakdown by fiscal year. So there are two ways that we have identified income tax funds. Income tax funds come by calendar year or tax year. However, with our city, we have to do it by fiscal year, and our fiscal year is July 1st through June 30th. So sometimes our numbers don't perfectly line up to the property or the income tax numbers. Sorry, my previous job was treasurer, so I go default to property tax quite often. So these numbers will show you that in fiscal year 19, obviously it was very new. We didn't have a lot of compliance at that time, so that's why those revenue numbers are so small. After that, we start to get into larger dollar amounts. So this is also after we've refunded back returns and things like that. So this was the actual revenue that we generated at that time. As you can see, it's went up every year. So in fiscal year 22 and 23, we started getting what they call state tape. And state tape allows us to go back to people who are in non-compliance, who have filed with the state of Michigan, but have not filed with us. And so that helped us increase our compliance. And that's when we started sending out letters for that. So you'll see in 23 and 24, we really were able to get some of that compliance done, which has raised our revenue. Now, that may not stay consistent at the 16 million because compliance for those prior years will be caught up and we won't have to do as much now that a lot of people are on board, understand how to do it, and don't have to be looked up through the state tape. So if you move on to the next page, this is our resident versus non-resident revenue. So as I stated, there's different amounts that residents versus non-residents are taxed. These dollar amounts are less than what our total revenue is. So to explain that, these are also on tax year. They are not set up directly to our fiscal year. And they are also the people who have filed. So we get withholding revenue plus people who file their taxes. And that revenue is, we'll say, for example, the 16 million. However, if no one files a return, we hold the withholding revenue. It's still our revenue. But if you don't file a return, we don't know if you need a refund or if you owe us something. So until they do that, these numbers still stay lower. So there is quite a significant difference. And I'll add that City Council has approved an additional person for our department, which their main goal is going to be compliance. And so as you can see, non-residents are probably much lower than they should be. It's easier to find residents to get them to comply. They live here and we know where to, send letters or get a hold of them. But when you have people who are working here for a short amount of time or they're in and out, it's harder to find those people and get them to comply with the tax. So this will be one of those person's job, is going after and finding where we can get the non-residents to comply better with the income tax. So if you look through those numbers, it has, varied from year to year. Some of those differences, right? There were some COVID years in there, non-residents really went down because, like, for instance, Michigan State, many people were working from home, so they weren't here to actually pay the income tax. Okay, if we go on to the next page, this is one of those caveats, which is the 5 mil reduction. So off the top of our revenue, we pay back our general fund those 5 mils of reduction from the city operating property tax. As you can see, our property taxes have, started to go up every year, but that is a part of the income tax that has to go back to our general fund. So we do this every year. We replace it based on actual amounts that we would have lost from the property tax. Okay, moving forward, this is where we get into our splits for the public safety, infrastructure, and pension. Overall, the 2020 for public safety and infrastructure are always similar. As you can see, once again, fiscal year 21 is less due to that COVID year, and then starting to pick back up. So we've never had kind of a normal year for income tax. We've had state tape collections, we've had COVID years, and then we had the very beginning when compliance was quite low. So we're still trying to get a feel on what our normal is for income tax. I hope that it isn't found by the time it's over. But going to these numbers, if we go on to the next page, this will kind of show what those dollars have done. Department of Public Works provided this information, and most of theirs has went to the major and local streets. So their projects show on here where their funding has come from and how much of that is income tax. So directly affecting the streets that have been repaved or remilled in our street or in our town. And then if you go on to the map on the next page, that'll show you from the beginning of the income tax until fiscal year 24, you can see all of the streets that have been impacted by the income tax money. So these funds really are going to more than just, your normal day-to-day functions of the city. They are going for above and doing extra projects for the city. Parks and Recreation, this is the same thing. So Parks and Recreation and our Department of Public Works share the infrastructure millage. So they both get a portion of it and they put it towards those items. So Parks and Recreation has quite a list of items. They've done approximately $6.3 million worth of projects, but 3.1 million of that was from the income tax. So those funds have done quite a few parks and rec projects that I think the citizens directly see and can benefit from. And so going on to Parks and Recs projects, I can give you a little breakdown of some of them. So just here in our Hannah Center, our theater got sound and lighting upgrades. They have wheelchair seating areas, and there's been a partial roof replacement here that was paid. The Aquatic Center has done a lot of updates, multiple aspects of it. They got a new fence out in the back by the softball complex, and they've repaved their parking lots. Bailey Park has an outdoor fitness center. Patriarch Park got the tennis and pickleball courts, which a lot of people really love. I drive by it every day and see lots of people at the pickleball courts. So, yeah, some of the,
Facilitated matching funds
Yep.
for a while.
yes. Yep, so that's what on the Parks and Rec breakdown, you can see where all of the funds come from for some of these projects. But as you can tell, income tax has a big part of all of them. Then there was a remodeling of the pavilion and the restrooms. The softball complex got improvements. Soccer complex got improvements to their parking lots.
And the grants require matching funds.
Most
So,
of them do.
Yeah,
Yep.
so this money was used to get the
Yep.
state grants.
Yep. So otherwise you wouldn't be able to get them
Yeah,
without
make
that.
clear.
White Park Trail got extensions, bridge replacements, habitat restoration. Tamarask Park got reconstruction of basketball courts, ADA accessible walkways. Henry Fine Park got a replacement of a pedestrian bridge. Northern Tail Trail got improvements. Stoddard Park has had a huge undergoing recently, so they have a lot of new things there: playground equipment, walkway benches and water fountains, dog run. And then the Dr. Robert L. Green historical marker was paid for out of this money as well, including a bench and accessibility ramp. So those are just some of the things that the income tax funds have done. Also, just to add, e-filing is now available for the city income tax. That's my little plug of the day. There's going to be a media release going out with that maybe tomorrow. So you'll see that with the new link and everything. But does anyone have any questions I can help with?
Did you take a look at the charter wording and see it in line with
Currently, it aligns with what we're doing.
that's?
Yes.
This with these, from the time of start of collection of income tax.
Yes.
2020.
Yep.
Second question is, so you got structure and Parks and Rec, which really nothing about pension.
Oh, so the pension, yes, I do have some notes on that. So, did the pension page not print? I think one of my pages is missing because I did have a whole page on the pension. It's not on there? Okay. Yeah, currently, so at the start, before we have the income tax, we were 49, I think 0.5% funded. We are currently at 64.5% funded. So this is a direct result of the income tax. So we did get a pension grant from the state of Michigan also. However, even with that, the income tax is a huge part of how we've increased our funding, and that is exactly what we needed it for. So somewhere.
Projection look like tax.
Robert, what did we think the projection was going to be? Right close in 2030 something to be.
Yeah, we'll get up closer to the 85.
Yeah.
82, 85% funded
By the end of the income tax.
by the end of the income
And
tax.
what, that optimal, what's the?
Optimal
Yes,
is always 100.
Oh,
But
75 is optimal.
Okay.
So,
You
yeah,
got ongoing paying in and
we have
drawing out,
ongoing, but
so.
also the stock market impacts investments,
Well, I know that, but I'm just saying, we've got,
which then
what's
impacts
what's the
the,
goal for the percentage?
yes.
Above 75 is
Oh, yeah.
All in
maintainable.
75.
And okay, so above 75 and the price is resolved, basically.
I said we don't get on the bad list.
But what it,
I think the state says that if you fall below 62%, they start looking at, managing your pension and other post-employment.
okay, I guess what we're talking about, I'm kind of fast forward, we'll be alive in 2030, but the idea that maybe I know that there was some concern about it not going 100% to legacy costs. And so the concern that it hasn't paid off legacy costs, maybe we changed the balance as we got closer to, I'm just, I know we had to stipulate we were sharing.
Right, so I'd have to look at the most updated MERS report to see how much is legacy unfunded versus active. So we're trying to, active employee should be covered annually by our contributions and then.
That's,
Yeah, so active, it's covered annually
so
by
moving
our
forward, we're
annual
gonna,
contribution, and then the legacy is where this income tax gain ground.
So what we're talking about is structural deficits, right? Are there any modifications to the benefits contracts as moving forward, or?
There was modification to some of the benefit contracts, so I understand, so police and fire still receive a defined benefit, thank you, pension, which takes their average compensation over their final 3 years, and I think they get 70% of that. But some of the changes are the new members hired in do not get to have their overtime included in that final average compensation, which had some impact financially on the overall legacy cost of that pension.
And has the contribution increased at all, or?
Has their contribution increased? I do not believe that
I
the
don't think
employee's
so.
contribution has.
it's not like any of us have. Sorry.
Can I just give just a brief history and then take the questions? Because maybe you don't know this, maybe you do, and I'm sorry if you do, but maybe somebody watching doesn't understand this. But IRS changed the ruling when Enron had, went bankrupt and all those people that had pensions, they lost all their money. There was nothing that was preserving that right that people had thought they had been guaranteed. So the IRS gave us some warning back, I want to say 2010, 11 or somewhere in there, maybe even a little earlier, that they were going to change the rules. What the rules were at the time that we were paying into our defined benefit pension, we were paying for it. And we paid what we had to owe to our retirees as we went along. We didn't have to put it away ahead of time, we just paid. And we were always paying it, everyone was doing fine. When all of a sudden they changed the rules and said, you've got to pay for every single person on your roster of employees to anticipate that they might need that retirement for that defined benefit pension. That meant if you had part-time employee that was working while they were going to college, you had to be putting away money towards that with their retiree pension in case they stayed here forever. And so now we got into this huge deficit because of that. And we also had a deficit at the same time because of retiree health benefits that were guaranteed. So over the time before, when Ted Staten, probably the last, I want to say almost the last 8 years of his time here as city manager, he slowly negotiated contracts where you started to take away that benefit for defined benefit pension, taken away for the new employees and gave them defined contribution. But they did a hybrid plan after a while because it costs less to do a hybrid. So there was some guarantee, but then there was also some that they had to do. It wasn't as luxurious of a benefit as it used to be. And they no longer had retiree healthcare coverage. It was frozen. for the current employees, but everyone after. So that all those mechanisms were taking place to try to now offset this new IRS rule that everything had to be pre-funded. So that's what the city has been trying to catch up all this time for all these people that they have. And even though we've lost employees over that time, our liabilities have still, they're living longer, healthcare costs are going up. So all those things have been happening during this period of time. So I don't want you to think when we're on a reported list that the city just was really negligent in the past. It's because the world changed along the way. And all of a sudden it was like a big bang. At the same time, I'll just say that the revenue sharing coming from the state was decreased. And so we're losing money there too. And so that was like, I want to say, what do you call it, when the wave hits, the perfect storm hits. And that's really what happened. And then, I'm thinking that the revenue sharing stopped around the time I had on council, which was 2007. And within 2 years or so, that's when the IRS changed the rules on the pensions. And so from that point in time, I have to say probably 2010, we've been fighting this battle to try to get out of it. All of us. Maybe you don't need that, but just want to try to we weren't a bad sleep.
Breakdown, like, what, I appreciate all this information, actually, it's very good, but, there's no breakdown of what the public safety funds go to. Could you just give us a brief?
Yeah. Actually talked to them today, and so most of it is training. So they have a lot of new DEI initiatives for the police department. The fire department has training. They use it for some new equipment and gear, a lot of their continued education opportunities. And then they've used it to get a lot of certifications for instructors. So they've used it for a lot of training and building up their force, mostly for employee retention purposes, to keep them here. So
That's just doing basic math. So this year, 2020, 16 million coming in. 20% of that's going to public safety.
no, you have to reduce the 5 mils out. Yep.
So it's really like 10 million.
Yeah.
10.6.
Yep.
And there's a page in your
The
document that shows the 60-20-20.
Oh, yeah.
So it says public safety in fiscal year 2020 received 1.6 million roughly.
and then they split it between fire and police. Go ahead.
Just for my background, thank you for all of this information. Citizen input, with the parks and recreation projects, I'm noticing that there are contributions and donations, for the citizens or neighborhood associations, kind of a part of how you selected certain projects. When we're looking at,
I was like, that's not my expertise here.
Yes, they are, because the park does a
Survey,
5-year
right?
plan update. Gets a lot of public input that prioritizes the improvements and assess the condition, the needs. From neighborhood perspective, we had a lot of input.
And we get money, we got money.
5-year plan.
Neighborhood associations, community groups, so the Bailey development, the Bailey neighborhood raised quite a bit of money. The pickleball club raised quite a bit of money for the pickleball improvements. So, yeah, there's definitely money coming in. I've never saw any corporate money or any
No.
of that, but definitely money from neighbors.
Yeah, and like she said before, some projects are specific grants from the state. And for us to get them, we had to put matching money in. So those would be very specific projects.
one other question, and just for my understanding, what happens after 2030?
The income tax has to either go back up for it ends, or it has to go back up for voter approval again. Anything else?
One more comment. What is the legacy pension deficit? Do we have any staff? So staff still has partial pension, but my understanding is it's mostly public safety pension.
Yeah, the defined benefit is the largest
Yeah,
aspect of the legacy cost as well.
and that's public safety.
Yes.
Not-
That is correct. The rest of the employees went to a hybrid.
Yeah. And that's
It's a full
manageable,
PC, DB type
Yeah.
formula.
and that's managed and covered, so it's really for public
Yeah.
safety deficit as well.
And interesting enough, if you didn't do the hybrid plan and you still had these employees that were at the time, had it in their contract to have a defined benefit plan, which we're gonna kind of discuss tonight, because that's sort of in there about the pension. It's that part. They found that if they just went to a 401k defined contribution plan, they would, the ones that were left in the defined benefit, it would cost them more for the city because everybody was the older people. So the amount, and so they were more beneficial to have a hybrid plan so that it offsets. And that's what they've been doing since. And if I remember correctly, there's probably under 10 people that are still getting, I know one person in particular, but I don't know if you're,
There are some,
department heads, they're almost all new, so they don't have the contract with them. But, I just know Heather Pope has been here a long time and she's one that has it.
so there are some non-public safety employees that still have.
But a few, but it's just a handful.
Majority of the non-public safety hybrid. But
How many, full-time employees in this city?
On the pension plans right now, there are 295 active employees. Now that's getting a defined benefit or defined contribution. So some are part-time, so I'm not including any of the contingent or part-time employees in that. But total membership in our retirement plan is 819 people currently.
Retirees.
Yes. Any other questions?
Of those, how many are retirees?
524.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. I actually like that you got this, so I can take notes on it. Start to take notes.
Like,
Nice to see that ahead of time. too.
Yeah. it
Yes.
was.
But when the discussion, if you want to pay Robert to fill us or anything, is it worth discussing the impact of what's going on with board water and light right now?
there's not a lot to discuss. I mean, we're evaluating the court's decision and moving forward. There's still pending litigation with the circuit court determining how to be refunded.
Fair to say that most likely though, that's what's gonna happen, is gonna be refunded, and the city's gonna not be able to continue to collect the franchise fee.
The city cannot collect franchise fee after they work issue things.
That's the Supreme Court, so that's not gonna change.
is there any wording that we could add to the charter that might have prevented this in the first place? So I think that would.
You're asking the wrong person. I wasn't here when it was decided.
Yeah, that was just my thought.
Yeah.
Is there some, like, looking at that, I'm like, is there some wording that could have made that a choice that council didn't make? It's a lesson learned, state they would lose walls to 20 years from now.
I don't think they have the answers. I know they went into executive session on Tuesday, so, I don't think anyone's gonna talk about it until they have their plan up there. Just, I guess. Good.
What are some things we're concerned about in that the cities will lose revenue because of the, they won't be able to collect the franchise fee or is it, will we collect the money? Is it going to have to come out of something else?
The budget reflects about 1.5 million in revenue. So from the franchise fee. So we have to look at how do we absorb that.
I'm glad that decision's in front of us tonight.
Just after about 3 to 5:36. 500 people out. get a refund.
Okay, so we're on 11, and if I thought we had gotten to most of this. I don't think there was anything else except that we were holding this. We have some later in the new business where we have made amendments all the way through 11.8, but I didn't see that we talked about anything else that would be changed in 11. So if everything's okay, I'll move on to.
Well, there's the question is, does anyone have an interest in putting the income tax proposal back to the voters before 2030? Either extend it or to change it or anything, just based on what we've heard, or do we just leave it as is? That's 11.1, if we're going to do something now in the time. I'm not proposing to you, just, hang out with it. It's fun. Discussing it now.
It's a great question. There's still, 6 years remaining on it. And I don't think we've achieved some of what was indicated when it was passed. So I think we'd like to get closer, maybe not right on top of the expiration, but closer to the expiration to have more concrete information on how the income tax helped with pension liability, as well as some of the other commitments to infrastructure and parks and Rec. I think we've got a couple more years that we'd like to demonstrate the trust that was given to us and how we, before we go back.
Are we okay to go on to 3.2? All right, 3.2 is chapter 14 of the city charter, and that is the elections. And I'll just give you the past ballot proposal. You see that was amended in 97 is really, they took everything that was in the charter that said how to do an election, and they said it will be followed by the state law to follow. And so most of that stuff is very simplified. I will say 14.4, when we were dealing with elections before, in an earlier one, we were talking about removal from office. Marie had let me know that you're not allowed to call a special election anymore. And so only the county can, and the school, I think the school district can. But so we definitely don't need that in there anymore, just because we can't call it.
Would you repeal the entire section 14.4 or?
I recommend that we leave it in case state law changes. If you take it out, then you can't do it even if state law does come back to allow a local unit under the Home Rule City Act to call a special election. So I like the fact that we're empowered to do it, except for the state law permit.
So we really want, this is where we put that general language we put in other places according to the state home rule. Special elections can be.
Right, same with ranked choice voting, right? We want it in here, but.
Right, it'll get in, because it passed, it'll get reflected in the document,
But
but it can't be applied because the state, yes.
same way.
And we really can't do any discussion on that, except if we feel like ranked choice voting needs to be put in this charter and under this, then we should put the language in here and have that in front of us so that we know, but we're not going to do anything to
So it
discuss
is
and
being
change
put
it.
in, it will be, I know, and I don't know if it was you or Tony's assistant that is updating our charter with ranked choice voting and Prop 1. Marie had asked that the law firm do it because there's some technical symbols that she couldn't do in the document. So I know that the law firm was being asked to update with those two proposals that were passed by the voters. So we're hoping to see an updated charter that would reflect that while we're still looking at charter fitness. So that you can see it.
It would seem like ranked choice voting on the election section.
So I'm going to put that to the whiteboard that we're waiting on that.
I do know when they were adopted, they called out the section
Where to go?
where it should go. Yes, just like I think Prop 1 called what section it would go to when proposal one passed.
All right, anything else on elections that?
They put it in like 3.6. Bank choice, what people with. Yeah, I don't know, it's just, yeah.
Depends on if it was presented that way. And if it was presented that way and voted in that way, then we have to follow that.
Plus we, yes, and amendment to number.
Yeah, it's 3.1A was what was on the petition that was votable.
We could certainly add some verbiage referring to that under the election.
I might be misremembering, but I think there's something in the Home City Act or somewhere that says that you can't mess with something that was
Yes.
approved by voter initiative within 2 years.
Yeah, so there's a,
So that wouldn't be something we could do right now anyway, I would think.
A
Well,
proposed
it's-
modification.
it was approved in November of 23. So depending on when the council put your recommendations on, it would be 2 years. Technically, November of 25.
Not for, sure, for the right, yeah.
So November this year, which is when council election would be, depending on any of your proposals getting placed on a ballot, they choose to do that, or choice voting could be adjusted because you're 2 years.
So I'm gonna put that at the end on our whiteboard, just to go back and talk about and see where we're at with this, because, we're not a policymaking board, but we can make recommendations. And we can see what Tony comes back to us with the language and how it's gonna appear, and then see if it makes sense to have something under 14 or not. And, see where we go. When you say November, for 2 years, could somebody be working on it before 2 years were up?
Yes, it's just, yeah. It just couldn't present it to the voters until that. When I don't know if it's 2 years or 1 day, that's why I was saying the Jonathan, so I don't know, you know, have to wait.
When would our recommendations likely be on ballot? November of this year?
I don't know, that's a be depending on, you know, it's got it to the council.
Let's just say we get to council on our time frame. That would-
It could. I mean, ideally, that would be the time to do it if you're already calling an election. The place that,
Normally it takes longer.
that I can't speak to. You could speak to the next.
They broke it up into 2, if I remember, but back then, I believe we had primaries. And, so they put it on a primary, election. And we've eliminated a lot of those different things, and it depends if the state came up with, or the county put something on in August with the primary for, that primaries. Sure about that. If they did something to narrow that down, then they could put it on there too. That's totally in their report.
So our last meeting is June 26th. Usually they have to have all the ballots done sometime in August. Maybe mid-August, September, so there's like a month. Oh.
And they're,
And lead time to get it all printed. Certified.
our hope was to present to council that by the end of June. That they don't have look up what their meeting schedule is in July and August, but they can call special meetings too. And they're gonna have a public hearing on this too, so there is some time in there where it's gonna be on their court to decide how this is. Otherwise, when you think about it, it probably wouldn't be till the election following. The following, definitely the primary election following November election. So those are the next 2 days, so. Okay, so, any else call for anything else on the elections? We just want, Ann to put something under special elections that talks about referring to home rule city. That will follow that, and then we'll wait on the ranked choice voting if we need to add anything to that.
So I know there was discussion regarding when electing council members to office. And I know we were referring to state law, but the state law that was said the first meeting in December did not pass. And so, you know, the question is the timing of when council members are seated versus certification. We're all kind of nervous, make sure I'm certified before council was ready to be sworn in. So I didn't know where the charter review committee was on that.
We left it where we had it. It was the first meeting. We've approved that one, which really quickly on this Asian knows about the top of that. That would be taxing you. There, it's section 3.3. The terms of office of council members shall be 4 years. The terms of office of council members shall commence on and date from the Tuesday following approval of the canvass of election.
Okay, so we did that language. Good.
So let's go on then to 11.6. You have that sample in front of you. And this was Dave's recommendation that he has a record of who the property owner is rather than the last assessment roll. So if this looks like what our discussion was about, then I'll.
Resolution changes to section 11.6 of the Lansing City Charter.
There's second. Okay, it's been moved by Hank, seconded by Wilkerson Johnson to approve section 11.6 resolution for change. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Okay. We have this first one on February approved here. Okay, then we're going on to 11.8. This is, again, this is the Board of Review, is they're changing it to again refer to state law. And state law that's right now says what we have in there, I believe, but that only can change in deficit protection if I remember correctly. Is that actually what we're talking about?
So do you, if I may, at the very end there where it says owners regarding the property, you add assessment, taxation. I mean, it just too general.
I think it's implied, but it's just me thinking that. I'll look to the lawyers at this.
It go either way.
That's why I was thinking more specific, but I like to make things not implied and just explicit. So
So you do want it or you don't want it?
I would think, yes, if that's,
I was thinking, I mean, that's however you, it can go either way. I was saying, because we're going to talk about correcting the assessment role, you know what I mean? It's fine, but obviously that can be changed. So if you think if yes, I'm of the opinion if there's ever something they can be confused, throw the word in and then there's no questions, right? Whatever you want, let me know, I'll make a note. What do you think?
that would make the most sense to me, just add the word.
All right, so we've done this before. If you want to move approval with that one modification, we could do that tonight. And then we'll.
Just add the word assessment at the very end,
So appeals by property owners regarding their property assessment.
right? And that's what.
Is that okay with everybody? So move ahead. All right, we'll need a motion to approve 11.8, the resolution to recommend, approve the resolution to section 0.8 with that modification that I'll support.
Oh, yeah, well, those, that,
Okay.
let them know, yeah.
And, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Okay, next is, moving on to old business. This is 4.9. And, this is our resolution. We've had a couple of versions of this to try to get to where we wanted to do. We've had a lot of discussion on where the committee's at this right now. Whether this has captured it or not.
I think so. Just the question, maybe John can answer of this. Undefined misdemeanor, does that mean up to 90 days?
The city can only impose a misdemeanor, under the home rule act, the city can only impose a misdemeanor up to 90 days, $500. And I think that the city code defines misdemeanor, if it's a misdemeanor with no defined penalty, it defaults to 90 days, $500. So I think that is sufficiently clear with that. I don't think we want to put in the charter that a misdemeanor defaults to 90 days, $500, because it's just a lot harder to change it if you do that, but
The 500 could change.
yeah, certainly. But I think that the language in the charter would default to what the penalty in the code allows.
Well, and a lot of the other charters I looked at have a violation of the charter. And then somewhere else, a
Says-
description of what a violation of the charter is, what the penalty for that is. So that's what I said. I didn't see any other charters describe a sanction, really.
Okay, well, if that needs approval, need a motion. By the foreman. Supported by Wilkerson Johnson. To approve the resolution to recommend changes to section 4.9. Right. Discussion on that. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Yeah, that motion is approved. It's 7:30, you guys.
I
I don't want to jinx this. I was just gonna say. Okay, so now we're on to chapter 8. Regarding gender neutrality. And you see what we have there. We were holding on gender neutrality so that when we get to the very last one on chapter 8, it matched up.
I don't think it's chapter.
No. But you're right, Liz. So does this reflect what we have talked about?
My only concern is that we say we're gonna identify by role or position. Is there gonna be spots where that then makes more sense, where it isn't a title? Citizenry, are there gonna be times when you talk about citizen, is there?
I think there is, we had something like that.
We're also gonna get a list. See if we have how many references there are, if there's some or something like that.
I thought the resolution draft that I saw said be identifying by position or
That's what this says.
Yes.
So you refer to individuals by title.
by title. Is that gonna be enough? It will title take all the spaces, because aren't there?
Probably does, and that's where we just make actually made for this.
So do you want to pass this and then give a list, because we're saying we want them to be gender neutral, and then we'll double check based on the list. Does that make sense? All right, then. Yeah, I need a motion.
I'll move, to recommend a resolution for changes to statute to charter. Refers to this policy resolution 20248.
Did you just make that number up?
No, I was in the process too. The other ones had a more clear, sorry, they had more, than a section, so.
So that's,
Let me just try that again. I'll move
Okay.
that, recommend resolution recommend changes to the Census City Charter. For all references to individual, when the charter remain gender neutral by referring to individuals by title.
got that.
Oh, you're pulling the data of the.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Looking for something that.
That was very clear. Okay, is there a second? Moved by, I think, seconded by Martinez, discussion. To vote, all those in favor of this, resolution to recommend changes to the charter, where all references to individuals within the charter be made gender neutral by referring to individuals by title. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That resolution is approved. Okay, now we're going on to continue discussion on section 6, the code review memo. Centennial review of the code was what we had talked about. We had all those pages to read how they had reviewed it back in the past. Again, I want to thank Lynn. She came up with that. I spent a lot of time searching that city website for this. I couldn't find that. So thank you very much. And do you want to talk about what happened on Tuesday?
So on Tuesday, the council did adopt a resolution set forth in the charter to start the centennial review of the code of ordinance. Directed that process commence. So
There a timeline for that? I expect a timeline for that, anything?
not at this time. I may have better clarification once I sit down with staff and say.
You're gonna be done similar to last time where staff comes to you as attorney with recommendations.
Yeah.
Open up for public input as well.
When they go to adopt the ordinance changes, that's when they have to have 2 hearings or 2 readings and 1 is.
So this referred back to 6.6, which is at least once every 10 years, beginning with the year 2000. Council shall by resolution direct the review of the code of exterior East Lansing and shall consider it. Copies of all of that be certified by the clerk. So that goes to this. I know it seems like, Jeff, you had some concerns about how that's done to do. I know we weren't aware of how it was done. I think what's interesting is we have all new staff, so it's going to be new eyes on that in that department. So then in the planning especially, even in the zoning department, there's people too. So that probably will take a little bit longer than normal because they're not as familiar, but it's good eyes, nice. Just like auditors, nice.
My only concern is that it's a good thing to do and just doesn't get done.
What would you consider to be, what would you consider we should consider as an enforcement?
I mean, we debated that over and over. It doesn't seem like there's any consensus on what it would be. So I don't know.
Be reflected in the city manager's evaluation. I mean, you're the one ultimately responsible for getting it done, and I don't think
Council does the resolution. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that part of the city manager, this is the city the charter is the city manager's manual or handbook. And so I'm hoping, and I assume that part of Robert's evaluation is compliance with the charter and upholding the charter is, so if he did.
No, we never considered it. Just joking.
So if he messed up, then, then you'd say city manager. But that does make it his duty, which I don't think is explicitly stated in the charter, that it's the city manager's responsibility. Council. right?
It's also
It doesn't,
switch out.
it doesn't say explicitly in the charter that it's the city manager's job to prompt the council to instigate a review. Is it?
And listen, I read that with you the other night, did prompt council and they adopted.
No, is that the wording, is the wording in the charter that it's on the city manager to begin the process, or do you just do it
Well, you know-
going above and beyond?
This is how I look at it, which is that, there's 5 of us who are supposed to know that the charter is now requiring us, as we're coming up on this time, and we need to take care of it.
Because you've read the city charter, because you're on the city council, even if you're new.
I can't speak for every council member.
But there could be an expectation.
But I would say that most of the council members I've ever worked with have taken the time to read the charter.
And it's fair to have that expectation. Our concern was that everybody's new, who even knew this was a stipulation, but this council should be familiar with the charter. This is the city manager.
But it's interesting, under the powers and duties of the city manager, 7.3K, it says to perform other such duties as may be prescribed by this charter or as may be required of the city manager by ordinance or by direction. So it's,
Yeah, that's a simple one, actually. By policy resolution, just simply say that whoever the city, that they should review the charter, and to the extent that any time frame is set there for council activity, to advise council that that time frame is running out or it's starting out.
If I could just make one point of clarification, we're talking about reviewing the city code, not the city charter.
sorry.
Ordinance.
And
Code of the city.
I just wanted to, they're distinct governing documents, and the charter is requiring the decennial review of the code. So
Did I say that wrong? I'm sorry.
I don't know, but it was
Yeah,
even loose with the terms, and I just wanted to be clear that we're really talking about reviewing the code every 10 years.
So then 6.6, we just aren't going to make any changes if you're,
What are the positions that we discussed with previous?
Oh, just. One is, this is in here for a reason, it's a good reason for it, but there's no enforcement mechanism like pass the city. So what do you do with a section of the city charter that not comply? So, other sections, there's things, I know, it was a meeting or two ago, I forwarded something to the city of Lansing was doing the transparency officer, I'm trying to remember from it now, there's like somebody that would basically require, was responsible for policing other departments, something like this. So I don't know, I was suggesting the sunset thing, which, it seemed to be supportive, and that's kind of complicated, so I don't know what it'd be other than. It includes one other clause in here that, I don't know, that's some enforcement mechanism for somebody to do this, or someone can
Well, I think we discussed
institute an
it.
action or something.
I think we discussed that it was gonna fall on the city manager to, or possibly adding wording, but I'm not sure that's necessary with the idea that because it's up to the city manager to uphold the charter, it's up to him to make sure council is aware of their
It's
obligation.
us, it's up to the council. It's up to the council to tell him. This is the council's responsibility to do this. So how do you force the council to do something?
well, and I would just want to say, do you want it to be so strict that there's an enforcement, whatever the enforcement would be, which struggle with, which we all struggle with. But I know in 2010, that's when it would have come up, the time. And I know the city attorney had given his notice to leave, so that, and to 2011, the city manager left. And so you had a new one coming in, and is that the priority for them to put their energy? We had a new city attorney, new council member, I'm sorry, new city manager. I know, I remember being aware we needed to do this because McGinty told us we needed to do this. He was the one that was always reviewing the city charter and telling you, this is what's coming up, you have to do it. So I remember it being the city attorney knowing what was in the charter to tell us that this is what you need to do to the city manager, and then the city manager said, you know, this is all gonna be happening now. And that was just a very upheaval time. You're looking at things. Do you put that on their plate, or do you have some flexibility so that it came late, but it came? I don't, you know, do you do it just to do it, or do you look at what's happening in the world? Like, what if it was in the middle of crisis you're having that year?
And it seems, based on what you're saying, that both of the times it would come up, which would have been the 2011, 2012 timeframe, and then the 21, 22 timeframe, there was upheaval in the council, upheaval in the city, but the city attorney's position both times. So perhaps there are reasons why things like this can get overlooked, I guess is the way to put it. And I think what we want to avoid, and I know we had this conversation before, I don't want to rehash everything we talked about before. What we want to avoid is putting in such a strict enforcement mechanism that is going to actually disincentivize doing an actual thorough review where, you know, it doesn't, you know, city council have to direct the review of the code of East Lansing, nothing that says how thorough that review has to be in this language. So if, you know, it's brought up to them at 9 years and 11 months, oh shoot, we haven't done this yet. They're just gonna say, all right, do it, come back to us in 2 weeks and say, oh, everything's fine, we don't need to change it.
Right. I would also point out, there's no sign of malicious, no sign that it was intentionally hidden or that there's something to be gained by putting it off. So, you know, to make something kind of punitive when it's not an action that seems to be done in any sort of.
It doesn't have to be punitive, but it can be assigned to someone. And, you know, I would ask, what's the role of the president of the council besides chairing the meeting? I mean, the mayor should be doing something like this.
Mayor is not supposed to do much.
Well, that's true. But you know, the way the language is currently written, all the council's responsibility is to start the process. And the process isn't going to happen overnight. So it could take till 2013, even if it was initiated in 2010, to get it done. Because as I see the process anyway, you're going to rely on the feedback from the people who apply the ordinances, cities, Lansing on a daily basis. So you're going to go to staff. You're going to say something like, do you see have you had any problems with any of the ordinances that you're enforcing? And they'll respond. And then the job of the city attorney is to put together a report like we see in this agenda that Yates sent to us, that or to that, I was not council at that time, but that details the changes that have been recommended, and then gives the city attorney's viewpoint with regard to it. Council takes that and makes a decision on what ordinances are going to change. And then it's all recompiled, in this case, by whoever we've got handling it at this point in time. We didn't always have that same handling our ordinance.
So maybe getting to what you were saying, how do you flag it? Maybe we could put wording in that says the 10-year, at the 10-year point, we'll be looking at, can we start this process, or we may have a resolution that says we're going to delay the process due to these circumstances. So if we have some caveat to explain why it's not being done, rather than relying on our memory why it wasn't being done, so it looks like the council's not doing something.
I think, I just want to say, just a couple, so all the marks I made last, so Dr. Rubin said, this isn't meant to be addressing your first statement. I don't think that we should just say like sections of the charter should just be, we're just gonna ignore them because it's like, no, like government needs to function, follow rules. There may be exceptional circumstances when something doesn't happen, but we wouldn't say like, not gonna have an election. Or anything, I mean, so it's just, well, I'm just saying, just move your thought here, like, I have a provision in the charter that should generally be enforced. Maybe there's some exceptional circumstances, but it's not. Mark said, it just needs initial.
Mark said,
So let me just finish this thought. Let's just keep talking about this, but like, we're trying to think, we're actually gonna do anything or not, otherwise let's move on. Just you could add some clause to this, I don't know exactly what it is, but they would just, somebody else in the city, take responsibility for it or something. That's the only thing I can think of.
Mark articulated some nice verbiage around the city manager's responsibility. Would that satisfy you if it was identified that it was the city manager's responsibility to notify the council that?
I don't think it's, the thing, you keep saying that, it's just the council's already to begin this, they can direct the city attorney, they can direct the city manager, direct anybody.
Corrected.
And it could take 3 years to do.
Yeah.
Or it could take 3 months, but they just need to initiate. So the big point is, if they don't initiate, how could anybody, whether someone else, city government or citizen, say, hey, you're supposed to do this? You need to do it. Because there's no mechanism.
Let me suggest, something to think about it would be that, like, I think in our budget provision, we make a specific thing that the budget will be presented to us by the first meeting in April or something like that. There, we could add language to something like this that said, at the January meeting in whatever, the decennial year on the agenda shall be a provision to initiate, this activity. And then every 10 years,
Yeah.
it just automatically goes on it doesn't matter whether it's the city manager or the assistant to the city manager or the city clerk who brings it up or whoever. Everybody knows that they've got to have it on the agenda every 10 years.
I think that's good. I think it's a good idea. I also think that when there's something that occurs so rarely, just things are gonna get missed and it's not it's not good, but it's also not, fair and fire that. I would suggest, just because it says this is going to happen on January 1st, 2030, doesn't mean it's gonna happen on January 1st, 2030. Just as right now it says at least once every 10 years, the council shall do this. It doesn't mean the council does it. So I just think that, it's a good fix. I'm just not sure it's an actual fix.
I have the question. You have 2,000 here in every 10 years. Are we thinking that it's 10, 20, or are we going from when it was completed?
Well, it says at
Which is-
least once every 10 years. So done in 5 years, if the council directs to review. Doesn't have to be on the 10-year mark. I think what Marjorie suggested makes total sense. The language could be a little bit vague so that there's some flexible movement. The month of January or whatever that, there's started at a peak, some meeting. It's very simple. That's what actually signs that solves it. At least it puts a little more, hold someone's feet to the fire a little bit that gotta do this, it should be done at a certain time. Hopefully some attention to that and bring it to the mayor's attention or the city manager or something.
Somebody needs to be awake.
So you want it in 6.6. Did you capture what we?
Where did we did we want it for January or where did we land, like what we're looking at?
Well, I can go to a March.
Yeah. So we,
If you had the first agenda, in that month, first business agenda.
For the year.
So it would be at least once every 10 years beginning. So council has done it now for 2025, right? So we can move beyond it for 20. Should we say at least once every 10 years? Or sorry, at the first meeting of every decennium?
Well, we're going to be, we're trying to make up for the fact that. So we did it. I think that, to the extent we get this done, in the next year and a half, we're going to take a look at it again. I assume in 2030, even though there might be a more compressed time frame there, because it doesn't hurt to review ordinances anyway. And it certainly doesn't hurt to ask staff, are you having a problem with, some kind of enforcement of an ordinance? Yeah. So you're probably getting that feedback anyway during the time period, and it gives you an idea of where you've got to make changes to begin.
So you want
It
to,
should be simpler than it is.
Yeah.
so you want to keep it at 10 years and there, do you want to specifically say in the years that, I don't know how you describe that.
I don't know what the wording is.
You don't need to
Reflect
do
that.
that. It already
I'm sure the
says.
lawyer can
Just one sentence.
But that's how we're getting to the problem we have right now, where we're not having it directed to be at a certain time. If we're not directing it to be at a certain time. So, you know, if I think what Mark's idea was, which I think is a very good idea, was to say it will be January 23rd, January 2040, and we need the language to reflect that.
Brought it up, and you could just have a new council come in. Three new council members elected to say, we want to review the code.
Yeah, so this would be the floor, not the ceiling.
So it doesn't have to be specific date at 2030, 2040. I think we've got it right. We just, something in there about the, first business agenda in January or something.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's just.
Yeah.
Just
The council wants to do this every year. Do it every year.
But you're saying that the charter should just articulate that should be put on an agenda. So very specifically what actions.
Correct.
I'm not sure I'm following, sorry. So it should be, what's your proposed language here?
Essentially what Mark just said is that it's on the first, leave this out as it is, to be done at least once every 10 years. Council by resolution shall direct us to have, and it shall be, that shall be done. What's the exact language, Mark? Somebody's business.
Yeah, it was, well, I made reference to the decennial review, so that's what it was, and I assumed that that is generally understood to be in the decade change.
Especially because I need a year, so.
So that to me tells anybody it's every 10 years, on 2030 and 2040, it's got to be on the first January, business.
Like that.
And it may be that, it's taken a long time to get it done, but that means that at least council sits down and talks about how they're going to do this.
And nothing in that language would prevent council, I mean, council at the time can direct a review and can change ordinances, that's what council there. So.
Well, in my thought, I'm slightly, as a Joan Q. public, I would love to see us do more public outreach prior to that final meeting to get public input on ordinance changes, but that could be, our council can do that. We can do it in Bay, we can do it at community meetings and that sort of
The
thing.
public we would have to notify and hold a public hearing on any changes in the ordinance anyway, and not even take action at that particular meeting. So the public will have at least two chances to comment on any changes that are being proposed.
How would they get two chances?
Because we have to have a public hearing and under our rules, we don't act at the public hearing. We wait until the following meeting. So there's another public comment period on that particular.
But by the second one, you're voting.
That may be where we're voting, but the public comment takes place before you vote.
But it would be too late to make modifications.
But now it is never too late to make modifications. And
But
then we don't have to take action that night anyway.
But you understand what I'm saying, and I'm an operations person, so I totally understand staff working in the ordinances as a critical voice, talk about the ordinances, but I do think it might be also an opportunity for the community if they have things that they would like to see moved into an ordinance or issues with ordinances.
Well, I think that this will be a matter of public notice, so they would have an opportunity to bring that other thing forward as well.
Even when it's on the council agenda, when it's opening up, that's
going
going to be a public, right, and that's going to be a public announcement of ordinances are being reviewed.
I think that if you've watched this in action, any of us at any time, there are council meetings where we go, I'm not ready to vote on this. We've got some people at the podium tonight who have said such and such, I want information with regard to it, see if we have changes that can accommodate.
I hear that, yeah.
And I think the Council of Neighborhood Presidents, which the mayor gets together, is that first step in saying we're looking for feedback, and then that's disseminated while they're working.
Sure.
Go ahead, Dale.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, as like the average citizen, I feel like I could just like reach out to the council or like a council member at any time, like when I have a specific concern and like, hey, I looked at this specific ordinance and like this, we need to do something about this. They can just do that whenever it's of concern to them.
And Dale, I would say thousands of people do that. Because it's so easy now with email.
I was just gonna propose in 6.6, which is the section we've been talking about. If we change the language to at least once every 10 years, beginning with the year 2000. The council shall, by resolution at the first business meeting of the council that year, direct the review of the code of the city of East Lansing, and then it goes on. So that tells everybody to put it on that first business meeting at that decennial. Is that sort of,
Yeah, that's great.
does
That
that
prevent
address?
council from doing it the second business meeting in January. I just want to be careful.
Okay.
I know.
Or do we say on or before
Say
the
this-
January 31st?
You could just say a business meeting in January.
Yeah, yes. Is there ever a chance there wouldn't be a business meeting in
It
January?
has to be one according to our charter, once every month.
This is where you have those exceptional circumstances where there's not. I don't know.
Or at the January business meeting
I would just say a,
at 8?
because the,
Oh, it's because it would be
you know,
more than
currently
one.
we have two, you know, at one point, every meeting was a business meeting and we had four every month, but, you know, it makes more sense to try to have a break, at least for staff, between meetings, at least once a month.
Okay, so at a January business meeting of the council that decennial year. Actually, we don't want to leave it be decennial because we wanted to have the doing it more often, right?
Well, we could do that anyway. We can do that.
I don't think it's right.
Structure.
Okay, here we
Set
go.
a minimum.
All right.
Okay, got that, Ann?
I think so, yes. Thankfully, it's recorded, so we can have it.
You're with us next
Yeah.
week too.
Yeah, that's right. I'll go back and check. I'll go back and check. That's right. But yeah, I think, so I have that, so we're gonna do, we're still leaving, I mean, why can't you guys decide what you want? At least once every 10 years, beginning with the year 2000, the council shall, at the beginning,
At a January.
at a January business meeting of that year by resolution and then put.
Which, you know, begs the question because the charter is requiring this. And it shouldn't require a resolution of the city council. It should just happen. But I think this gives the public notice that something's going on. So the thing you were worried about, at least this.
Yeah.
You know.
Hey, that was a good conversation. Please, that. Great. With that. All right, 7.2. This is item 4.4 on our agenda, 7.2. Go back to that. This is, city manager. This is the, in the higher date, when we talked about this, the hiring of city manager needs to live within 25 miles of the nearest boundary of the city, consistent with Michigan's Public Act 12/1999. And also designating the, deputy city manager. Also, in her absence, you can have somebody else take acting roles. So does that reflect our discussion?
I think it does. I think before the width, which is corrected, I think that would start that in the middle of the sentence. So it needs to say the city manager shall, with the approval of the council, designate, and so on. I think for a period where there should be a comma in the right before it.
If I can comment on this, this language has always kind of given me a shake. Because it essentially mandates, it appears to mandate the city manager to appoint a deputy city manager and then says, but only with the approval of the council. So I think I think between council and designate, the word may should appear so that he or she is not mandated to appoint a deputy city manager. And clearly, if the council has to approve it, we had a request to it for it last year. We denied the request. I think it's appropriate to mandate that other city employees shall serve in the absence of the city manager, but deputy city manager is a whole different thing.
Okay. I think we'd also, on a slightly different topic or same section, but we also discussed it, a time frame, adding a time frame here, which didn't make the draft, I don't think. I think we had landed on within a year of the hiring date, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that made it.
Yeah, we did talk about giving the chance for the city manager to determine who the person that they thought. It's really a succession plan in here in case of really a tragedy. It's an unexpected tragedy.
And when I look at this, I think there's really two things happening. So I could see council needing to approve it if it was a standalone deputy city. But the intent, as we discussed, is to have the city manager identify an existing officer or department head to have the designation in addition to their title of deputy city manager, right? But not to have a standalone. I can understand if council has to approve the standalone. I'm good with that. But if council has to approve who you're designating as your deputy, that gets into maybe we never come to an agreement on.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that could be done is the last sentence. We could reverse those two last sentences, and I think would probably make more sense. If it said, nearest boundary of the city consistent with Michigan Public Act, then the city manager shall designate an administrative officer or department head to serve as acting city manager during the absence of the city manager, right, deputy city manager. And then after that sentence, say with the approval of the council, the city manager may designate a deputy city manager who shall perform the duties of the city manager during a vacancy in the office or the absence of the city manager. Because the way this is worded, if you even appoint a deputy city manager, even though you're gone out of town, you don't have any authority. It's only when there's a vacancy in the office that they have any authority. I think those are problems that need to be looked at.
I think that was implied that the deputy city manager would manage, even if the manager was out of town, but that's not how this is written.
Right, I think that's probably how it's functioning, but I don't think we need to move. We necessarily need a charter that governs by implication. I think we need to be more specific about what can be done or not done.
So let me try. So the first red line, underlined thing is about locating
Right.
close to the city. So then the next sentence would be the last sentence. The city manager shall designate an administrative officer or department head to serve as acting city manager during the absence of the city manager from the city. So we're deleting that deputy city manager.
Temporary.
Do you want temporary absence or do you just want absence?
What does absence mean? So if Robert is living in Saginaw, is he absent or is he here? I mean.
Well, right now, he's here because we haven't designated that he has to be here. This now doesn't. The language, an absence is where you can't come and perform the duties. So you're in Rome. You can't come and you can't do things remotely from there. You want someone on site here. I would think, or you're in the hospital. Yeah, you're in surgery.
In cases I'm not going to be accessible to direct either virtually or telephonically, I appoint someone to take the responsibilities of that.
So then should we say instead of from the city, say from the city manager's post? Say to make it very clear that it's when the city manager isn't available as opposed to when he's in Saginaw.
I think that the word unavailable is more important. Because if if there's a decision to be made, I mean, things have changed. COVID has changed everything. So Robert could be in Rome and have a Zoom meeting with people back in conference room A and make decisions. And they would be valid decisions for us. But if he's unavailable, then somebody has to make that decision. And maybe that's the key word. So.
Yeah, the availability of the city manager as opposed to the absence. That's
I don't know where they're located. It's the same with the green trades.
Anything else on the or?
Oh, you're not interested? Okay, so the city manager should designate an administrative officer for department.
One thing, temporarily unavailable, because I don't want to move into the Caribbean and then suddenly, try to run the city.
Or determine and to serve as the acting city manager during, while temporarily unavailable.
But what if it's not temporary? You still have an active manager.
Well, they would still work. So. He's still the city manager under those circumstances.
Right.
It's always temporary.
And the second sentence is what happens if he becomes vacant. That is the appointment
Then
and
we,
the.
yeah, we move to the sentence above, to put it at the, afterwards.
And then are we putting the last, so with the approval, is that gonna go at the end then?
Yes.
That's a position we have to.
But put it after we talk about the availability?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Temporary.
with the approval of council, the city manager shall designate.
May designate, right? We wanted may, not shall.
May designate. And you want the timing of there.
But the timing, I think you were saying that within 90 days, or within 25 months.
No, yeah, the timing was for the first red line, not for. Sorry.
That was, because we talked about giving them 6 months or whatever to move if they had to relocate.
Year.
The year, yeah.
And I think in terms of timing for approval of a deputy or for designating a deputy city manager, that, I don't think we timing there. I think it's just discretionary.
Come on. So after the first red line, you just want after 1999, within 1 year.
That sounds like what we discussed.
So then the second one, I'm on the shall and may on that. We'll go, so 1999 within 1 year. Then we go to the last sentence and we added when unavailable, when temporarily unavailable. The city manager, when the city manager is temporarily unavailable.
Just have to read, the city manager shall designate an administrative officer or department head to serve as acting city manager during the temporary unavailability of the city manager. That is best.
No, yeah, very, we shaded it, yeah. Very.
So now we're going to the third sentence, right? With the approval of council, you wanted to change, the city manager shall designate, may designate. Don't we want to have a succession plan?
Well, we have, I don't think we can have a succession plan, frankly, because the city council is gonna, let's say there's a vacancy. City council is gonna appoint an interim. We appoint them. The fact that a person might be deputy city manager that we've actually authorized does not mean that they are gonna be city manager. They may make decisions until we appoint an interim, but it's still our responsibility to fill that slot.
Well, and I think that's been the concern is the time frame between the city manager is no longer able to hold that office and council's action, decisions that nobody's there taking the lead.
You have to meet, so you have to notice a meeting.
If we strike temporarily, have we taken care of that issue?
So the temporary goes with appointing an acting, right? So,
That's what you mean.
but if there's a permanent,
He's,
let's not describe the opportunities.
this is on heart attack tonight. What do who's in charge?
So
Okay, the city council has to get together a meeting to do this. They have to notice the meeting, so you have the 24 hours for the notice, the 18. So you have a day there, then you have another, then you have the date, of the meeting, then you have to make sure all 5 people are, you've got to get 3. Because you have to have 3 people that can meet to do this right away versus having, well, he would think if something terrible happened to me, this is who I think can do this.
Until council.
Until you meet and appoint an interim.
If I can ask, because it seems like what's underlying this is that there was an attempt to appoint deputy last year that council did not agree with. So what was the rationale behind?
No, it was to budget.
To budget for a certain position.
A full-time.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't budget it, which is the same thing as saying, we don't think one is necessary. So, and I will say that I think during the time I've been on council, there has been a much longer time where we didn't have a deputy city manager than there has been when we did have a deputy city manager. So it functions. The question is really is there something in this language that prevents one of these administrative officers from stepping in to make decisions? Let's say if we fire a city manager and now the position is vacant. Diane's point is, if we have a deputy, then the deputy automatically can make decisions. Well, so can they. So, maybe the word temporarily absent or
I think there are two.
is the issue.
I think there are 2 potential avenues to go here, at least in how I'm processing this. In order to have some sort of succession where there is an acting city manager, one is what Mark is currently saying, which is that the city manager shall designate an administrative officer or department head to serve as acting city manager during the unavailability of the city manager from the city, or the unavailability of the city manager. That would put the decision as to who control or who acts when the city manager isn't around permanently in the hands of the city manager prior to the city manager's permanent unavailability. The other option is we stick with what's in here right now, which is that council has to approve who the deputy city or who the acting city manager would be, which is not how it currently is, which would at least make it so that there's a succession plan in advance, but council still has a say in it, which feels wiser to me from what Mark is saying here than just having it totally in the hands of the city manager. It feels like that should be, if there's going to be an acting city manager in that horror scenario, it feels like that should be a decision that council has a decision point in, as well as the current city manager. So I'm wondering if maybe we just fix this by saying that the city manager shall designate, with the approval of council, an administrative officer or department head to serve as acting city manager during the unavailability of the city manager.
That you could do that. I know that is the way, I think that's the way.
So currently,
That's
I issue a list of department heads that will be appointed as acting to council. So that list is, I think there's 5 people on it, if my memory serves right. That any of these 5, I will appoint acting in my absence. And then I issue a separate letter when I'm getting ready to leave and will be unavailable. That then is circulated around everybody.
To identify who you chose.
Yes, out of that list of 5. But something I don't remember is when Tim Dempsey or Tom Fehrenbach had the title, in addition to being director of planning, building, and development, they had deputy city manager. Did council approve that title, or was that granted? And I think that's where you're coming from. Somebody else has been designated by the city manager that first and foremost, if I'm not around, that person's in charge. If both of them were not around, then that acting city manager list was activated.
But let's just say that they were not deputy city manager as identified by the charter. It's like you can identify one of the employees as a director without the city council approval. I think George gave them that title so that everybody would know that when he's gone, they can make decisions.
They gave him that title and he gave him a contract.
Yeah,
With that
well,
title.
he gave him a contract, but the city manager can give contracts anyway.
Yeah.
With your approval.
I,
So there's a lot of things that was in
That
this
was
document
happening.
that may not have been followed.
it was happening recently and until, the last election. So, I think that, I don't know how, we didn't seem to care that George had designated like that because we knew that he had the authority to designate 2 administrative officers to fill in his place. And that's all that was, as far as we were concerned. We did not approve a deputy city manager.
And that was my point I was trying to make earlier. If it is just an additional title given to one of the department heads, why would that need city council approval? If it's a permanent full-time position that the budget would have to allocate resources, that's totally within council's approval.
But it's also Diane's point, which is council is then identifying what happens if the city manager leaves or is made at some point in time. We have created the succession because we have already designated to undesignate. That would take our action also.
I think leaves or made to leave isn't really the situation we're talking about here, right? And because one would hope that if the city manager were leaving or made to leave, that there would be
Should be doing that the same. meeting.
that there would be at least 2 weeks notice. We're talking about a situation where there's
It's a
a
very-
death or, yeah, where
It
some,
happens.
Unfortunate demise.
Yeah.
yeah, so that's where I think we need to hone in on what a succession plan
Step
would
up,
be.
because right away, the whole place is gonna be in turmoil, and the city council, they have jobs, some people don't now, but a lot of people that run through city council have full-time jobs. This is not, okay, I gotta find a meeting. There's stuff going on in their life. You just hope that the city has that person to step in until we can get and make, everything settled down, we can make these decisions.
Well, the city manager role is so critical, so critical.
I was just gonna say, we're only looking at this as a succession plan or in a case of emergency. I like Jonathan's language. I think that he solves that problem. I tend to, when I read this initially, I read deputy city manager and my mind immediately went to, now we've got a designee that's going to have a job title with a certain budgetary requirement and duties and stuff. And I don't think that's what we want to do here, or assume that by just making that appointment, that person steps in as city manager on a permanent basis. I think that what we're really doing is just in case of a dire circumstance where the city manager cannot act, we have someone that we're designating. And I think Jonathan's language actually sort of addresses that.
Does the city manager sign contracts and things too? Because would that be critical to have someone identified to be able to sign contracts?
Or those approved by council, yes.
Oh, did you capture?
No, I don't know. So this is.
I know it.
Yeah, all the, okay, so we have the first part up until, Public Act 212 of 1999, comma, within 1 year, right? New sentence, the city manager, this has changed, shall designate an administrative officer, department head to serve as acting city manager. Where did we land during the temporary unavailability? I thought,
I think what Lynn and I were discussing, and I don't know, if the group feels this
Yeah.
way, was the city manager shall designate the city manager shall, with the approval of council, designate an administrative officer or department head to serve as acting city manager during the unavailability of the city manager.
Just saying, the city manager.
Sure. Yeah.
we're getting rid of deputy then?
I think getting rid of the deputy concept entirely.
Okay.
Just that seems to be how things
Sure.
operate right now.
So let's talk about logistics. How does that approval happen? Because right now I provide a list of 5 people that, and I notify council, these are the 5 that I will appoint as the acting city manager in my absence.
But if you just say 1 or more.
Well, the point is, council didn't approve that list. It's one of these 5, and it depends on,
But what if you're not able to designate?
Well, Robert, something were to happen tomorrow, who's in charge?
That's the whole discussion.
So, like,
There's no,
But out of the
So-
five, how do
the
we-
mayor will say he's in charge. No.
but no, but, in all seriousness, if something's gonna happen tomorrow, who's in charge? I mean, that's what they would.
When there was an assassination, he had a lot of people in the president's group that thought they had not.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
That
yeah,
thought they
right,
were in
right.
charge. That's
Right.
what else.
And-
their name?
In all seriousness, if there's no one in charge tomorrow, if something were to happen, that's a problem. That I think Diane is really flagging needs to be addressed.
Well, and
So even if
the
it doesn't,
five, which one of the five is acting? Like, we have five possibles, but if you're not able to designate one and it's an unplanned absence, how do we know which one is them?
I was wondering, like, if we could just put like how it is functioning with that list into the code. The city, with the additions of like, the city manager could prioritize the list where it goes like 1, 2, 3. And then the city council approves it beforehand as well. Like solve all of it. So it's like what we're doing like in practice with the priority and the council approval prior to it.
I like it. And everybody knows who the person is. Sometimes who people have taken charge. And the person who's on the list and priority on that list will know that that's,
That's their responsibility.
and if you know you're going to Rome for 2 weeks and you're taking vacation, then you can submit a letter saying, actually, this time it's this person, the council can approve it.
Right, it makes it there.
That's, yeah, right, the approval isn't there.
because the list has already been approved.
So I guess,
And I'm saying there's nothing to it because this time person number one is also, person
Right.
one doesn't want to do
that's
it.
why, as I go down the list, 3 of them may not be available that weekend.
Right.
So I pick the 4th.
But if you prioritize, that's all taken care of.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's a key.
Right.
Okay, so 2 questions. So then that, how are we wording that in this? Regarding the order or no?
Well, how about if you said the city manager shall provide council a designated list of administrative officers or department heads and a priority list. Administrative officers or department heads to serve as acting city manager during the unavailability of the city manager. And then do you need, then the city man, during a vacancy in office, do we need that sentence in there, or do we just drop that middle one? We just drop it out. That makes it simple.
Yeah, we can put that entire middle sentence.
And the word is a priority list.
Well, and the other one had the deputy city manager, which I thought we were getting rid of anyways, right? Okay, so we'll cut that out. And so the city manager shall provide city council with a list of the administrative officer department head. Is that what we did? We just put list. There's probably some list. In order of priority?
Yes. Yeah. Well, the lawyers put the right language. Quiet Asian there. Like a 5-year. 6. I just think that's so important. I would appreciative of you guys understanding that, because I just don't want it to be messy in the city. Something tragic. And we've had these tragedies happen around us, and you know that.
Right.
People are.
When I read it initially, I wasn't thinking that would be intent. Intent implied.
No, that's. Hoping it's just vacation.
Right.
Yeah.
I know that.
Okay, so that was our, 7.2. So now we're on to 4.5 on our agenda, which is the changes to 10.9, which is, annual report of the city shall be published, and we wordsmith that quite a bit. Does this now meet this? So that
I
the
think
calendar and everything is okay, and it's everyone's time on it. All right, so we need a motion on that.
Move it.
Okay, moved by Wiles, seconded by
Second.
Hank. Any more discussion on this? Not, call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. The resolution to recommend changes to 10.9 has been approved. Now we're on to continued discussion of 7.6. So in our minutes, I have here, we talked about this, and this goes back to our city library, city hall. It was 7.6A, I believe that we were. So, here's where that he or she would be changed to city attorney. And, that's one of those instances. And it was the last three lines. Loosely formed, you don't want that. We're talking again about those formal opinions.
I think that had some language, so.
Thank you, everybody. I have scribbled down here, we need to resolve questions regarding FOIA section 13's waiver of the attorney-client privilege. I think that we were tripping over that maybe in the formal opinions was where we were tripping up as to what would be a formal opinion that could be disclosed to city council and what would have to be. 7.6.
Oh, it's 7.6, and you can pull out our minutes from last meeting, because it's bulleted out what the 4 points were that we were talking about. That talked about if there's more than one city attorney, do we call our different people city attorneys or not? Or is there one designated group? Mark, you could answer that.
I didn't hear it, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have on here, we have one city attorney or we have a couple city attorneys. This says the city attorney, but if you have different people and doing different roles, but they're not the same law firm. Before it was the law firm and the chief of the person in the law firm, one of them was designated, but they allowed others. Now you have different people that are doing different parts of the city. So that was a question in there. And then it's the formal opinions. And you know, the more I thought about it, is most times the formal opinions will come out into the city council packet. You know, this was reviewed by the city attorney, just like the fire chief puts their stuff in the packet. And, safety officer or whatever.
Yes, the public document.
Right. So the loosely form, you know, will be written and electronic. I mean, you can't just say that they'll just write it electronically. They'll provide it to council. So we need that somehow that language in the last three. And again, it's where it's located. But we had 4 points here. We said that I'll say the first one was the last three lines. The second one was attorney-client privilege. Well, then it's not a formal opinion. The formal opinion is part of a council packet. It's related to something that they requested to decide. And then committee members requested clarification of 7.8, whether it waives attorney-client privilege. But again, if it's a formal opinion, there's no attorney-client privilege. And then it's the legal services from the prosecuting city attorney. I'm quite sure when we talked about that, it's just we had numerous people. And do we want to cover that?
Okay, let me say a couple of things. One, there is only one city attorney. Even now. that is this firm, is the hire an assistant attorney. If you look at G, Easterly is the council may retain special legal counsel to handle specific matters, and we have retained Easterly to handle our district court work. And so he is a special legal counsel to the city. He is not the city attorney. And we don't look to Easterly for advice on any activity we're taking or advice on any of the other litigation that we may or may not be involved with or that we may expect. So I think having it stated in the singular is okay. I don't think that needs to be addressed. That's my own, personal view of this language and my view of how city attorney firm and Easterly sort of interact. Yes, I think they both applied for the position, although I think Easterly only applied for the district court work. So, and just by way of explanation, when we have had, the McGinney firm was very talented in the things that it did when it was city attorney, but it didn't have a lot of experience in federal civil rights actions. So whenever we had the involvement of a settlement where we were sued or involved in litigation like that, we hired outside counsel. The city attorney plays a part in that, like in terms of evaluating or advising us on those outside counsel, but it's still the city attorney has specific functions that they perform. So, and I'm trying to give me the other.
So maybe it's just as simple as you finding out if the city clerk has a list of all of the formal opinions that came from.
They don't. And so that
They do
was, they do not.
That is,
And that's the conversation that Tony will tell you, that his opinions, if they're in writing, are attorney-client privilege documents. The state law prevents this portion of the charter. And so unless counsel who are the client leaves the privilege, it's not something the public gets. And that's where I think George Contis was trying to say, what types of opinions would fall into what's viewable to the public and what types of opinions don't. And I don't.
Would that decision be made as we build a packet, so the council would have determined that this is going to be included in the publicly available packet? Right, who would decide what's going in the packet?
So the packet, they may get an opinion, but it's not published to the public.
But what Diane is talking about, and I think it makes sense that if we've got an opinion that's included in an agenda and a packet for a meeting, that packet is public.
But there are certain packet items that are not published.
But that they're chosen to be withheld.
To be exempt.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but we've got we're sharing none. That's what I'm hearing.
Okay, so then, I'll let you go first.
Let's work backwards. So an easy one, I think, is 7.6A, that this does not waive the attorney-client privilege. We discussed last time whether this waives the attorney-client privilege.
But this is moot. We don't have.
It's not a bit, okay. So does that make sense? I know Mark, and I know someone else brought it up last time, maybe it's Jonathan, whether this can be read to do that.
but I'm looking at this language and I'm thinking we need to somehow something that is privileged from something that is formal. So that formal doesn't mean privileged. And I'm not sure how we construct this language. Maybe you can take a look at it and provide some advice, but we don't have a list of privileged opinions, and generally speaking, privilege would apply to an opinion that advises us related to litigation that we might have
Ongoing.
or potential litigation, would advise us as to trial strategy or some other litigation strategy that we have. And if it is a general opinion, should the Public Works Department be, involved in, I don't know, recycle Rama in Lansing. And he gives an opinion that, he can't be held liable if something happens at that. I think that's a formal opinion that gives direction to city staff through the city manager. And that formal opinion is generally provided to the city council and the city. And the city manager is a matter that clearly is okay to have.
So you're looking at things that would be more, with the other five of us attorneys sitting around this table, would be more like the opinions of the attorney general.
Correct.
Yes, yeah.
And that are just, we think this is legal.
Advisory.
And I think that was what intent was.
Was intended.
But maybe you now as not having enough nuance to let people know this is what it means. When even the AG, I've written AG opinion. I mean, basically, they're a brief on a particular issue and advise the public of where the attorney general, that's the attorney general's opinion as to what should happen here. I think those should be public. And to the extent that we've asked for those, we don't often ask for that, frankly. Years I've been around, I can remember maybe a half a dozen times.
I mean, so I imagine what
I
the
think
city
that
is.
Dale gave us some language on this last time, didn't you?
I recall, mentioning like that there should be like 3 categories, So I don't remember my exact number, but there was formal opinions, informal, and then like privileged. I believe was like 3 categorizations we wanted to have, or like from what I was reading here.
And that's how the attorney general operates, frankly. We would, if we were advising a client on what we want to do in a particular piece of litigation, that's privileged communication. But the legislature has the authority to ask the attorney general for an opinion. And a formal opinion goes through the opinion review board, and the opinion review board votes to recommend to the attorney general the language. When I was a younger attorney, I sat on the opinion review board, and those are numbered and published on an annual basis.
So that's kind of what this is.
And the informal opinions might be something where, in my case, Mr. Kelly might say, I don't think we need a formal opinion on this. Put something together, and then I'm going to send a letter to the person who's asking that gives them advice as to what I think on this. But it's not formal, because a formal opinion, the courts have to at least acknowledge it. It isn't binding on a court, but they acknowledge it in a decision.
When Tony writes something up for you guys, I imagine it's stylized as like a memorandum, right?
Correct.
Memorandum is not an opinion.
Right, he said he articulates quite clearly in his
Yeah.
communication, whether it's.
So maybe we're spinning our wheels here and there's really no need and it's fine as it is.
Yeah, it's good. We treat those memorandums as a privileged communication because they almost always relate to litigation or potential litigation.
And they are to be confused.
Except that we've now spent how much time talking about it in terms of formal opinions. And it seems to me that if the formal opinions are not quite there and we're not going to make them public, maybe we need to just drop that language from this decision. Because again, if we're looking at, as Pam says, John Q. Public going in and saying, well, the attorney, city attorney, gave an opinion to the city council. And if somebody thinks simply because that was reduced to writing in a memorandum that constitutes a formal opinion, we don't want us to get stumbling and have an argument with somebody or have somebody have a FOIA request for that. And the lawyers are all having agreed on what we're talking about, but members of the public are going to lose it now.
Right, but we're not talking about publishing memorandums, we're only talking about the formal opinions available, and I can definitely see going back and looking at, so say we look at the tax in 2030, we're reviewing the tax proposal, and what were the the lawyer at the time said that this was completely legal, so now someone's making an argument that we can't do it, well, you know, that formal opinion was that it was legitimate at that time, but so the memos we wouldn't be looking at.
Lynn, what you're suggesting is that there's an issue with the wording in the
Okay.
charter that doesn't distinguish adequately between.
A memo and
A
I.
Memo and a formal
Yeah.
opinion.
So what if this, the city attorney shall act as legal advisor to an attorney and counsel for the council and all its members, and it matters relating to their official duties. He or she, or as we change that in this one,
The attorney.
shall give written advice to any official or department of the city when requested in writing by the council of the city manager. Period.
Or shall provide written memorandum or something, advice, yeah.
Because then it's informal advice and it is not considered formal, and it doesn't negate privilege that might be attached to what anybody would view as a privilege.
And it just,
So it means like if the clerk says, hey, you know, we're being asked to open up another site at whatever. Are we allowed to do that? Then that's just advice from the city manager, city attorney. It's provided to them. It's obtainable by FOIA. So it is obtainable by the public anyway.
Wait, what?
Let's,
This isn't. My concern is that these formal opinions will make the citizens understand what we're paying. So we're paying these legal fees, and if we see formal opinions, oh, that is what the lawyer's been doing. So there's no formal
I think,
opinions. It has kind of the, what are they doing? What- you know.
speaking as a lawyer, I think a lot of our work doesn't go public because we're privately advising clients.
Yes, but privately advising clients in criminal cases is very different than my tax doc. Well, I guess
I
you're a
don't think
public
it is.
defender. But, well, that's nice for you. Everybody else's job, particularly the city manager, is out here fully in public, right? That is kind of,
I'll just say that, I haven't looked at the bill lately, but, the attorney's bill doesn't just say, hey, I've been working hard, here's, unless you're Easterly, because that's his contract. But Tony's contract is, you're gonna detail to us what you've been doing. And that would include, and the public has a right to see the billing, and it will say, provided, advice to the public works department, did such and such, he's got some hour, he's charging us by the hour, so he said, like, he's identifying exactly what he's.
but I want them to be working. I get that they're working for the council, but what they're doing is facilitating the council to run the city as well as possible. So we are actually, the citizens are actually who's employing them, but their work is working with the council to do the best thing they can for the city and for the citizenry. So while they work with the council and for the council, they're really working for the city. I'm just, for the citizens, because you see what I'm saying? So I get what you're saying about it's almost all under wraps, and we don't need to make any of their communications publicly available by default.
But it would be publicly available.
I mean, for example, a formal opinion, you could imagine one coming soon as to how the city attorney interprets enforcement of Prop 1, right? Like there's those types of formal opinions that will be public because they are designed to be public. They are written to be public.
And where will they be?
That, well.
Will they be in a packet? Will they be?
I mean, ideally, right now they'd be at City Hall and City Library.
But how would they get there? So they're identified,
They'd be identified in advance,
but
Mark
I'm
was
like,
describing with the AG opinions
what
there.
Diane is saying, so then they show up in the city council packet. And if they did, then they.
They said, part of the problem there, so he said that if it's written, it's privileged.
I think not necessarily, if it's written
That's
with
what
the,
he said.
but if,
He said Tony said.
That's right, that's Tony's interpretation of his written communications are.
Unless council has requested of the firm to provide a formal opinion as to.
That's the language that we have in this clause. So we have to deal with written, whether it's privileged or not, and then I think will help us begin to split the hairs here. But if we don't do that, we don't know what is available to the public and what should not be available to the public.
I think Mark's.
Well, I'll just say that I'm not, just because it's written doesn't make it. I'll just say that. It is the subject matter that makes it privileged. Just because something is written does not make it a privileged communication between an attorney, as a public attorney, and their client.
Okay, then we can move on. You can see.
Oh, no, I think Mark had the fix of getting rid of saying opinion twice in this paragraph because that confused the issue. And so I think if we adopt Mark's fix, the city attorney shall provide written advice to any official, that clarifies when we're talking about privileged advice versus what's going to be formal opinions that need to be published and available to the
You
public.
could also set privilege information, apply privilege information as well.
How about the city attorney may provide written advice to any official or department of the city when requested in writing by the council or the city manager, which shall be protected by the attorney-client privilege unless waived by city council.
That's good.
And then we
City
can just,
council could waive it.
by the city council, and then drop the rest of that, because we're not filing copies of formal opinions with the city clerk. Or maintaining them in chronological order. That's just not anything we've done or anything
We've
else.
never done that.
I can't say never.
No, you're thinking.
I'd be astonished if we've ever done it. We haven't done it in the 30 years.
Then if we did that, then would that make more information not available that would specifically require council to release anything, or maybe things that.
So because I was looking at this, listening to Mark, and maybe you can tweet this, Jeffrey, is that, if it's written advice to official or department of the city, then that really is more of an attorney-client kind of relationship. If it's a written opinion, like if, DPW is going to undertake certain environmental things, and it's the opinion of the city attorney that's going to put them in compliance, or if they act in a certain way that would make them out of compliance with certain state regulations, then that would be a formal opinion, or that isn't being directed to the city council in the role as legal advisor to an attorney and counsel for the city council and its members or the city manager. I think that first definition of what the city attorney is and who they're acting on behalf of is what creates the attorney-client.
Can you read it again, and then Dale is the next person?
So if we do this, the paragraph, I would suggest maybe we tweak it as the city attorney shall act as legal advisor to and attorney and counsel for the council and all its members in matters relating to their official duties. The city attorney may provide advice to any official or department of the city when requested in writing by the council or the city manager.
It shall there, because if we request it, we need
It's gonna happen.
Oh, thank you. Which shall be protected by the attorney-client privilege unless waived by city council. I'm just throwing that out.
Can I add one suggestion?
Sure.
The request is very few requests are in writing. Council just say, I want an opinion on this, they don't write it.
I think that's really interesting, because I had a ton of attorney-client privilege written things.
No, I'm not saying the attorney doesn't. But it says when requested in writing.
But I think that.
Council doesn't request
We
it in writing.
require it, so I think that that's a protection for the attorney. So if you have to, if you can't say they didn't give it to me when you don't have some proof that you requested. But, you know, that's to me.
As an attorney, I like that idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's you want to say, otherwise, it's while you're trying to get the verbal. When you write it down, you gotta say, I was formally requested.
That
Things next,
requirement to
and
be in
then
writing
Ruben, and then
It's already in the charter. So the request to be in writing, when requested in writing, is already the language of the charter.
I don't, but I think Russ is saying is I usually don't have to write it, but I would want it just as a comfort.
The way that you've suggested it, if it is requested in writing and then provided to us in writing, it's a privileged communication. If I say, hey, Tony, I'd like to know about such and such, and he sends me something, that's not going to be privileged.
Dale, then Ruben, and Jeff.
I'm good. I agree with what them proposed.
I'll defer to Jeff.
But go ahead. Get something to say.
Yeah, I think the purpose of this section is to make communications provided to the council by the city attorney available to the public, and that's what we should be protecting here. We should not be, I think if we allow the city council to decide what they're going to release or not release, does not meet the spirit of this particular section.
I agree with Dr. Martinez. So that's what I was gonna say. The big picture, something privileged needs to be protected, which it already is here for you. So I think if we just even add to this, just say, you know, this doesn't apply to privileged information if that's not already obvious. Number two, the spirit of this is to provide information to the public so they understand what's legal and how things work. I can think of just two real world examples that may apply right now. Water and waste situation. Council was advised of something, reality of something. Maybe it's good for the public to know that. Not maybe on a closed session last night, but originally, rationale for fees, skies tax, all that. I think some of that information is better in the public domain. And the other thing I can think of, someone just brought up DEI. Say somehow what's happened at the federal level affects the city's DEI programs, and someone's asking a question about that. I think it'd be good for all of us to know that. And again, maybe there's some aspect that's privileged, is then shielded, but the big picture is the spirit should be disclosure so the public understands, you know, what's the legal basis for why we do it. And I want to see that protected. So I think saying that if you add it here, the city council would have to waive everything. I think that's moving against what this is trying to do. Just do that instead by changing formal opinion, the wording formal opinions, and or just making it clear that certain things are exempt. And this isn't being followed, it's never been followed. So
And so what I read this is that formal, you all are using, your lawyers are using formal opinion. I'm thinking of those attorney-client privilege opinions that came to a council member to inform them of what decision they should make. Let's just say, an example might be someone's basement flooded and the attorney gave you this confidential memo that said, here's why you don't do it because, we're legally not liable because of this act, and it goes through everything. And that was labeled, let's say that's labeled, attorney-client privilege. I'm not turning around and saying to you, our attorney said, can't do that. I'm looking at what they're citing, and I might say, I think this Michigan's law for municipal people say that they're not liable. That's just the way it is. And so our hands are tied. Or even like the overlay district, people say, I just don't like it, so I'm going to vote against it. Well, as a council member, this is the law. This is what the city attorney told us. You can't just say, because I don't like it, and everybody met the qualifications that were in the ordinance, can't not just do it.
that's a good example. Because I see that at the planning commission, people, I just don't like the project, the planning commission must have said, well, that's not our basis. We have to say, so like if that kind of advice is out there, I think that helps inform people.
Yeah, but I was thinking these formal things that the attorney was McGinty through most of my time. I'm thinking that the city clerk is keeping those opinions, or the law firm is keeping those opinions. But I'm thinking that the city attorney, if we had a different city attorney, then they're taking those opinions with them. And I was thinking the city clerk kept those ones because it informed us why we acted how we did. So that's where I read this as. I just felt like somebody's got to keep those.
Well, same, it's like there should be a repository of privilege.
Yeah,
That are-
I thought it was privilege, and I thought privilege was formal. That,
What would be interesting historically too, to go back, and what was the city attorney saying 15 years ago? And maybe at that point, privilege should be waived.
That was still the McGinney firm 50 years ago.
Well, yeah, you know, it's something that would not affect anyone today, but just to see, well, what's the rationale for why they did this in 1970? You know, it'd be nice to have that available to the public.
There are, I have another suggestion to take a look at anyway, along the lines of what Lynn has already provided. So that where B is, that we take a look at that, not have a B there. I guess it would be a B. That would say a city attorney or attorneys may be retained by the city council to conduct for the city all cases in all courts whenever the city is a party. That is a privilege. I think something that comes out of that is clearly privileged. But we could also say the city attorney shall also, in C, D, and E, prepare, officially pass upon, and the city file in the office of the city clerk an original copy of all franchises and give advice. And the city attorney shall have the responsibility of calling it to the attention, all of which is not privileged. And we specifically say that that doesn't involve any privileged communication. And that would be kept at the city clerk's office and available to the public. It would take some changes to the language, obviously, but you know, there are things here which I think are sort of implicate privilege, but there are also duties that are not privileged in any way, which may result in a written opinion of some kind. So just blanketly saying anything the attorney provides in writing would not be appropriate for privilege, not everything.
so can you go back with Tony, basis on this, and give us some proposed language? I really don't want to go into what you said, B, C, and D like that, because all of those things will show up in a packet with signature of the city manager or the city attorney, because they review it. It's said in the packet. So they are public documents. That's why I thought that first one was all those ones that I had that were written, that were attorney-client privilege that I had that I shredded about 10 times.
Right.
You know,
That kind of gets to my concern about the general transparency, and I think we've got a bunch more FOIA discussion, maybe hold that till next meeting, but that the idea that we have packets are archived on the website. You can get all the packet contents. If there are published packet opinions, they're public. So, and so they go into a communication on a packet, like that's just where they go.
And Robert said to me, I don't like the word formal. I read formal very different than what you attorneys were describing it. So maybe that needs to be a little clarified in that. So maybe if you take a stab at that to see if it would meet what we kind of thought our discussion is, we could talk about that. That's
Very simple way that the last sentence is saying, unless containing privileged information, a copy of these opinions shall be made available to the public.
Can we get rid of the loose leaf form too?
It's on the moment.
Will be included in a public meeting, a record of the next public meeting or something, like, how do they get into the public? How do they get?
Isn't that what your chapter 8's gonna do?
Right, and that's, but also, but maybe not, because maybe the idea is that they go into a packet, we know where all of our packet information is. Like if they're in a packet, that's public, it's public here, on the website, you know, and so we're talking, I feel like there's a lot of the exceptions. We've got a lot of public information that's readily available online, and if this moves into an agenda, it's public.
So
Just real quick, if there wasn't a privileged document,
It wouldn't be there.
It's a public record that's available.
Yeah. It
It's
should
what
go
it's
to a
for you
meeting.
right now. I'm saying it doesn't need to go to a meeting though.
But it doesn't need to go to FOIA. If it's in a meeting, you don't need to FOIA it because it's,
Okay, but some things may not be at a meeting. I'm just saying, it's public, you can make a request for it.
but if it's public, why didn't it go into a meeting package that's presented to the public on a regular basis? And you don't have to worry about FOIA.
But not every opinion or advice or piece of paper is gonna show up in a meeting.
Why wouldn't it if it is considered public?
Because not everything happens at a meeting.
There is a consent agenda that is a full, robust, all actions where it could reside.
But public records much so much broader than that. Like when there's a employee creates a record in the department, that's a public record.
Right.
It doesn't come out as.
Right, and that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about formal opinions, quote unquote. We're talking about specific things and how do we get them as a public record while they're in an agenda. And so, yes, there's gonna be the things in somebody's drawer or a print on pavement. That's that whole elaborate FOIA question.
All right, so in summary on this, Anne's gonna try to come up with some language. Ruben suggested some simple thing just to put at the end unless it's attorney-client privilege. We won't do chapter 8, which is 2 down from this because we're not going to feel good about chapter 8 unless we know it's in chapter 7.2.
Right.
7.6, sorry. But I wanted 7.12, we thought we were going to get some language on that, but I think we were kind of split on whether we felt people should be allowed to have someone on there, and I hope people have some time to think about that. So if we could take that as the last thing, and then we'll start our old business, which really our only old business will be 6.6, 7.6, and chapter 8.
I propose we hold off on doing that, 'cause I think when we did our straw poll, it's 4-3 at the last meeting, without all of the voting members being here, I'm not sure.
I'll wait for Jill.
Okay.
They say if you approve full discussion,
Okay, and we, in the minutes, it said we asked for language for that, which was opposite of what's in there. It was, they were gonna preclude people from being that if you look in the minutes. So we can have that because we'll do either or, so that's it. That's a good point. And we can do discussion then at that time too. because Okay, anything else? Anything else for the next meeting that you think we should? Okay, on our agenda for the next meeting, we're gonna be looking at, we're having our public meeting at the next meeting. So, we'll have that and then propose changes from this, which we really have these 3 4 discussions. And then we have a break for a month, and then we'll go into the last 5 chapters in this. Oh. Right, the motion to adjourn in order. Moved by Wilkerson Johnson and supported by the foreman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.